All right, so good morning to you. And the topic that we shall be studying together today is fundamental concepts of economics. So even topic one was quite fundamental in nature, but I was just trying to building up the argument. But here we will go a bit more based on what we have learned from the previous slides. But I would still reckon it fundamental concepts. Economics is a vast subject. It's difficult to define. If you go back in the history, 1776, I think, The Wealth of Nations was written, the first book of economics. Until then, economics and politics were together. And if you read some, I have that classic book PDF with me. If you want, I can share it with you someday, Wealth of Nations. In that book, nowhere the word economics is used. It's called political economy. So economy and politics, politicians and economists were doing the same thing. You know, the old kings and those emperors and those rich, monarchs. And then they have some people working for them, ministers. And one of the most important ministers, there were two most important ministers. One was the defense minister, because then the wars were quite rampant, quite frequent. And the second minister who was more concerned about day to day, was the minister of finance, who will collect the tax from the people, all those things, where to spend money, if Maharaja wants a new palace, how much money to spend, where to get it from, all these things. So it was called political economy. But then the discipline of political economy, when it was about the beginning of, I would say, 19th century, then both disciplines, economics and politics, they became so big that it fell with its own weight, and politics, which we call as political science in many universities, and economics became bigger. So these two siblings were separated. Economics during the 19th century developed so much that economics itself became a full-fledged discipline. And then one branch of economics was called as business studies. So economics itself was bifurcated into economics as such that we are studying, and the second branch became business studies. And then at some stage, these two siblings also, their umbilical cord was broken, and then they became separate. Economics developed. There was labor economics slowly, agriculture economics, welfare economics. We are studying a lot of welfare economics in this course, microeconomics, macroeconomics, and so on and so forth. Even financial economics. And then in the business studies, we started observing that the business study in its own rights became full-fledged discipline. And now there was marketing, human resources, finance, accounting, organizational studies, tech business, and so on and so forth. So now the thing is that the disciplines are so much getting more and more identifiable and more distinct. So this is the journey. So economics is a very, very vast subject, but don't forget that the mother of even you're studying technology or marketing or HR, don't forget the mother is economics, right? And the real discipline where it all comes from is political economy. So you will see many political dimensions, even when you're studying the business studies. So that is very, very important. So economics is a very vast subject, difficult to define. I remember one very famous economist, Barbara Wooten. She once mentioned sarcastically that where there are 6 economists, there are 7 views. So it's very hard to package everything in one definition. So therefore, there is a multitude of definitions. when it comes to the discipline of economics. And I think in almost all the disciplines, it's very difficult to put everything in the one definition. It comes from political economy, it comes from mercantilism, sociology. I remember that until very long, the very famous school of economics called London School of Economics, it is still called London School of Economics and Political Science. So much are these two things related. The classical school of economics, Adam Smith is called father of economics. The gentleman from Glasgow, and that in that Scottish region, his way of line was try to understand. This gentleman wrote the book in 18th century, and the name of the book is Wealth of Nations. And over there, the classical school of thought says that economics is all about wealth. If you ask any economist, if you read all the prominent economists who were on the scene in the 18th and the early 19th century, most of them would say that economics is all about how to grow wealth, how to become rich, how countries can become rich, how people can become rich, how companies, how countries, people, everything, the center of gravity of the discussion was wealth, wealth, and wealth. And even then, even further, for them, the wealth was the physical wealth, not the intellectual capital, not the copyrights, not the patents, not the formula, not the software. No, for them, the wealth mean, can you build up new palaces? Can you capture more lands? Can you colonialize the countries? If you're a country X and you know that in country Y, there are very vital, important minerals, metals, and so on and so forth, go and capture them, increase your wealth. Or you are producing goods in the factories. So all the wealth, first of all, man, not in the gender sense, the humans basically. The humans were compromised in favor of wealth. And then within the wealth, all the discussion was centered around the physical form of wealth. So slowly, this idea was, and not only slowly, but I would say obviously, we are human beings. At some stage, people who were more about the welfare-oriented thoughts, and remember, the time is very important. It was 19th century, and in the 19th century, Europe was getting enlightenment. Scholars, sociologists, psychologists, political scientists. That was a time when a lot of social reforms were going. Reforms, there were social revolutions going on in Europe at that time. So anyone who have a spine at that time, who can steadfast, who can say, you know what are you talking about? Wealth, man is not for wealth, wealth is for man. And once again, don't misjudge me, man here means human being, yeah? We are mankind, right? I know this sounds a little bit. So that is the time when people were gathering around this idea that this material wealth is okay, but this is just to help the human beings. Human beings are not meant for the wealth. The wealth is meant to make our life better. If you don't have the physical form of wealth here, which you can see, learning process can be difficult. We have so much of gadgets, we have so much of infrastructure. It's all in the physical form. So I'm using physical form because I just want to go by their words. So I'm reusing the words of the classical economist that the material wealth is the most important. But here we are using the material wealth in this room, but the idea is not that we're using it for the sake of using it. We're using it because we want to maybe create more knowledge among the human beings. We want to debate, discuss new ideas, and then you people reflect and then we have a dialogue. This is how the society's civilization evolve. So we are making a tiny mini contribution to further evolving the human being or this civilization. And in this process, we are using the material wealth also, apart from your intellectual wealth. So technically, we are utilizing, we are exploring human wealth. Sorry, I used the wrong word. So technically, we are using the material wealth to enhance the intellectual wealth. All right, this is what should be. But the classical economists, they were not recognizing this idea. And to be fair to them, at that time, they were not even aware of this thing, that society in 200 years or something would be totally a different society. And we would even start planning to go to Mars and Moon and whatever. So that, see the socio-political economic dynamic of Adam Smith when he wrote this book in 1776, right? So to be fair to them, then maybe those people never envisaged that how far technological progress can push the society to a different, the whole equation would change. So that is the point. But that doesn't mean that we should agree with the idea. They were more focused on material wealth, and then I would discuss later. But then this gentleman, Alfred Marshall, he came on the scene, and he said that, you know what? No, it's not material to man, not material, but we need to talk about the mankind. Mankind is the most important thing. The human being are the most important thing. That's what I just discussed with you. And then slowly, there was another economist called Robbins. He came on the scene and he said that, Marshall, you're doing a good job. You're better than Adam Smith. But to be fair, what you're talking about is very, it's like a dream that you can get everything human-centric. The reality, what you sound is very romantic, that let's do everything to uplift the human beings. It's nice in the poetry, it's nice in the prose, but the fact of the matter is that, let's see the reality. The reality is that we all human beings, we have the unlimited wants to fulfill, but the means to achieve them are limited. They can be plenty, but still limited. So the unlimited wants, so Robbins, who talk about scarcity, he says that it's fine. He's not contesting Marshall. He's definitely against Adam Smith, who talk about wealth only. With Alfred Marshall, he agree with that mankind is very important. But the fact of the matter is that, what is the reality? The reality is that we have scarcity. Why scarcity? Because we have unlimited wants and limited means. And the wants are so that they're recurring, they keep occurring. Remember last week, we were talking about drinking water example, the marginal utility. Don't we get thirsty time and again? You can be thirsty, you drink water, your thirst is quenched. Does thirst not come back? It comes back. So they're recurring, right? They reoccur. And moreover, what you want can lead to further wants. Today, you graduate, you did your schooling, and now you are in the Applied Sciences University. Your want is to complete your BBA, isn't it? But then once you achieve the BBA, will you leave the university? Would you leave the education? No. With the BBA, many of you will try to study master's program. So the want, something which was a want at some stage, like you want to achieve a goal to graduate the bachelor's degree. That want would become a mean, a source to achieve further wants. After masters, many of you, maybe some of you, may consider doing another master's or doing doctorate. So it leads to, so it's not a never-ending stop. never-ending process. So the idea is that the scarcity is the reality. But now in the 20th century, in the mid 20th century, there was another school of thought which went beyond scarcity. Chamberlain is the leader of these economists, if I can say the word leader, but he was one of the most prominent leaders, economist, who was concerned about the growth, that, hey, you know what, fine, it's okay. All these things have been settled now. Let's grow. And this is why in the 20th century, if you look at the mid 1950s, 1960s, 1940s, that is the time when many of the Asian, South American, and African countries started getting independence. And then they became free country. They attained independence. And what was the big problem for those newly independent countries? Economic growth. Along with the other objectives, one important mission for such countries was how to be on their feet, how to become self-reliant, how to grow, in terms of economics, because they were totally shattered economies. They were just like in doldrums. This is why this new idea of growth became very important, that we need to grow. Countries must. This is why the industrialization of many. This is why China came into the scene, that it becomes slowly a manufacturing hub. Southeast Asia became very prominent. East Asia became very prominent. Newly Asian tigers came on the spectrum, like Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan. They became new things. Some countries, and then that was a time when in the Gulf countries, there was an oil revolution, and then some countries were sleeping at that time, like India, but slowly those countries were also, a lot of things were happening in such countries so that they can suddenly become emerging economy. And the same thing was happening in Africa. Unfortunately, South America has been struggling with very deep-rooted problems of political issues, and that is why South America couldn't catch up what Asia did during that time. So Asia is a classic example who adopted economic growth as a very important agenda, despite corruption, despite resource shortages, despite all those issues. Asian economies became very important. And I forgot the name of Japan, which became such a big superpower in no time. Even despite they have some war and they were devastated, but eventually that economy really became a role model to many newly developed, newly independent countries. So a lot of political things were happening, which have a lot of impact on the economic growth. So that is a time when the middle of 20th century, but around the middle of 20th century, when this economic growth became a new agenda. That was a time when the whole focus was on Asia, Africa, which people would not talk about much. But then these countries started they became, at the center stage. So try to understand, whenever you read economics or any discipline, make sure that what was the time at that time? So then the context becomes more important to understand. Welfare can be both quantitative and qualitative. We know when you consume goods and services, your per capita income increase, and per capita income increase is a sign of your increasing welfare. But this measure of welfare is more quantitative in nature, but at the same time, welfare can also be qualitative. Happiness. You are walking in the street and you have a constant fear that somebody can come and rob you with your money, or even kill you, stab you. And then in a different situation, you're walking in the street and you don't care about what time you go home, you feel safe. These are two measures of welfare. Safety is a measure of welfare. So, but you can't measure it, right? It's qualitative. So the idea is that whenever you talk about the welfare, which And welfare is so important that we call a certain group of countries are called as welfare states. And you are sitting in one of the very few welfare states in the world, called Finland, isn't it? So welfare is very important. Some measured signs of welfare are so stark, so prominent, so obvious, but there are some, rather, most of the indicators of welfare are more qualitative in nature. But of course, because of the measurement issue, we in our research, whenever we do some research in the universities, we often all right. So as I said, that the welfare can be both quantitative, qualitative, but unfortunately, or because of some measurement bias, we use the quantitative measures of welfare more than the qualitative. How to find that you listen to a poem, how much your welfare is increased, it's difficult to measure. You go on your holidays and you are in the middle of forest, lovely lake, and you spend a week over there. How do we measure that your welfare has been increased by how many points? So there is always a measure, but you can see how many hospitals are in the city. Why? Because you can count 1, 2. You can also find how much investment has the government done to build those hospitals. You can see in monetary terms. You can see the budget. If tomorrow the country's government make an announcement that we have planned to invest 3.5 billion euros to build up a new chain of hospitals, super sophisticated scientific hospitals, you have a quantitative measure. But when you visit a doctor and the doctor is giving you prescription, which is again is measurable because you can check how much money you pay at pharmacy. But see, the way doctor talks to you, consoles you, show the empathy, you feel good. Doctor is listening to you and say, hey, don't you worry, no problem. This is something not so serious. I mean, all those things which gives you more relief. We can't measure it, but it's a part of welfare, isn't it? Even it's very minuscule, very minor thing, but it enhances your welfare. Same way, you can come across some rude teacher who can spoil your day, basically. Your welfare has gone down. But how much? We can't measure it, right? So this is how the welfare is. So there is always a bias towards the measurement issue. And why quantitative welfare is more in the scene, because the quantities can be measurable in monetary unit. If you want to see how much budget on education has been done, just see how much money is there for the school. Count the number of teachers, say, check the salary bill, multiply, you will find that, oh, there is more salary to teachers this year than last year. So teachers get more money, they have a motivation to teach better and more. So it's so easy. The crime rate has gone down in the city. You can find out how many crimes have been committed last year, number, or how many new police officers have been recruited, how much money they are getting, you know. So it's so easy. But the qualitative thing, the peace, the fear, the fright, the feeling of uncertainty, that is something which we don't sometimes have direct measures. Welfare is important, but not costless. So there's no freebie. We have a saying that there are no free lunches in economics. Welfare has its own cost. Welfare should be followed in the letter and spirit, but to make a welfare society, get ready for countless sacrifices. I want you to go through this small one slide, this in the text in the red, go through it, spend maybe 2-3 minutes in reading and find that even though the welfare is important, but it has certain, how to say, the side effects as well. So I take a pause now. So please go through this slide, which is you can see in the red text, and get back to me in a few minutes. Yeah. Okay, so let's read it together. You know what is Chancellor? The Chancellor of Exchequer is the Finance Minister of Britain. And it's an old text. And the Chancellor says that the hardworking families, their motivation to work is going downwards when they feel that there are people who get the state benefits for doing nothing. So therefore, some people argue that if we are giving too much of unemployment benefits, then it may discourage people from working, because then they would also come in the same bracket. So there is a one guy who is not working at all, maybe willingly. This other person is working all day. And when you see there's the money they get at the end of the month, there's hardly any difference. So then why somebody should work more than if there's not much. So is it so that the welfare things, the concept of welfare goes against the spirit of hard work and incentive to work harder? And if everybody becomes a dependent, then where the money will come from? Because the state puts tax on hard-working people and companies, and then that tax is spent to benefit people who are living on welfare. But if people who were working hard feel discouraged, they may also join the group of the dependents or people who live on the welfare. So is it even sustainable? That is the idea. So when I read the first text, the hard-working families is something which get my attention. Do you think, now it's my question to you, and get charged now, do you think that there is a trade-off between the motivation, incentive to work hard with the benefits, the welfare benefit the states are giving? In other words, more welfare, more benefits, more nicely you treat people who are unemployed, dependent, there are some issues, some unfortunate issues, then this more benefits you give people who are hardworking, they want to grow, they feel demotivated. Is it like linear relationship between the two things, or there are some hidden nuances as well? Please do discuss with me. If you are a very hardworking person, your family is working hard, you are doing your businesses, you take a huge amount of risk, or you work hard at your job, but then you find that somebody in the neighborhood is not working at all. I mean, everybody is getting some benefits and there's hardly any, then you feel, I mean, of course, you don't want to change sides, maybe because you feel that, no, I have to work hard, but don't you feel somewhat demotivated, discouraged, delusioned, irritated, angry, frustrated? Mm-hmm.
For me, coming from the country that we don't.
In Britain, if you're unemployed, I think like in Finland as well, when you're unemployed, you are dependent, then you get the money from the state. It's not about that the state has made a new school building. No, it's not that. It's like simple straightaway cash transfer. You get cash, you get your bank account become richer by some. That is a point. Anyone else? Yes. I repeat my question. That if you go by the text, it looks that the UK government wants to give benefits, they want to continue them, they believe in it, but the question is how to operationalize it. How much benefits to be given, how to be given, to whom to be given, where the buck stops, where you say, hey, you know what, you can't get benefits lifelong. And then should the state give you benefits, welfare in the form of cash? Well, there's a danger. The first good thing about cash is that it gives you freedom to spend money on your family and yourself. But then the danger is that you can misuse it. There are people getting money from the welfare benefits, and then they spend in casino, and they become drug addicts. They buy drugs with that, and the kids are still hungry at home. The other option is that should you get the vouchers, which you only go to the store, you transact those vouchers and get the food. So how do you see? And this point I'm raising because when we have a habit of criticizing our leaders and the politicians, but see how difficult job they have. They have to please different people, different sections, different strata, which have a completely different attitude. So there are always somebody who's unhappy. So my question to you is, how would you run the benefit system of a country if you are given the chance to run? If you are the finance minister of a country, how would you touch the benefit system? That's my question to you. So please bring your points. It's not fair. This is what is the way of thinking, that people out of work can earn more than people in work. This is unfair, definitely. In 2013, the government of Britain they put a ceiling that maximum a family can get a week in terms of benefits is £500, or it can be maximum 26,000 a year. You know what? I have lived in Britain. 26,000 a year is not even the salary of many really good jobs. You get my point? I'm not talking about the CEOs, top executives, but if you enter a company and you're doing a quite decent job, good job, office job, even then, 2013, getting 26,000 a year is not easy by working. And then there's a limit that a family can get, 26,000 pounds a year in benefits. Bizarre. And the state said that, and remember, this was the limit. So it means that before 2013, it could be even more. The limit is set. The limit is set. £500 a week or 26,000 pounds a year per family. And the state said that so it means, let's be clear, that before 2013, there was no limit to the benefits. And now the state says that by doing so, the state can save £100 million, which may sound a lot, but it's only small, 1% of the total budget or whatever. And the state is saying that we need to do something. In London, the limit could be £23,000 a year of benefits for the family, but in the rest of the country, it could be £20,000. And the difference is that because London is very big, is very expensive city, so the limit can be a bit more. But for the rest of the country, maybe it's not as expensive, so there can be some discriminatory limit for London and the rest of the country. So this is a text. It talks about the state's philosophy, ideology, but then it also highlights that it's not painless thing. It is expensive. Not only expensive, but you also want to make sure that you get the optimum benefits. As this gentleman was pointing out, that there are many benefit frauds in many countries. So yeah, so this is the idea that even though welfare sounds very, and this is where Robbins criticized Alfred Marshall, that hey, you're talking about very romantic thing. The reality is that we have to bring together unlimited uses and the limited means. In another country, the state doesn't care about the welfare. With this amount of money, they can build up factories and start thinking of giving jobs to people. So again, another philosophical debate is that do you want to have a system in which you give the benefit to people, but then you will not be able to use the money to build up the manufacturing, production, development capacities. Or you don't want to give the benefit to people, neither cash, no vouchers, but instead you want to create the superstructure, the infrastructure of things, and give training to people, give education to people, and get them job there. Each system, in each option, there is an element of welfareness. Giving a job, if I create a system in which after graduation you people get the jobs, I'm also doing welfare, isn't it? That is giving, making people ready and making the system ready to accept those people is also welfare. So which welfare? So this is why this debate is very important. And I strongly encourage you that if some of you happen to be come to join my flock, my nest of doing research in your second year, choose this topic as well. Not much research has been done in UMCs about the welfare thing. This can be, now because I'm discussing with you, I'm getting more intrigued to it. So please let me know if you are interested in this type of research. There's one more. What is included in the term welfare? This is also very important. So please spend some time on this topic, on this slide as well. I just took some excerpts from the text, and I took it from Washington Post, but please go through the full article at home when you get time. But this is also something which you can consider. The first example was a British welfare, and now we talk about the American welfare system. So that is also full of challenges. So please go through it, and quickly we can go through together, yeah. And then if you have any questions, points, you can ask me. The state spokesperson is saying that we spend 1 trillion each year on welfare, but there has been no reduction in poverty. This is something happens. As a finance minister, as a prime minister of a country, sometimes you feel that, hey, you know what? We are spending millions and billions and trillions of money. But where does it go? Where does it go? So when there's a trickle-down effect, when there's this central government, they start spending money, comes to bureaucracy, come to politicians, come to the regions, come to the states, provinces, come to the local village, local city council, and so there are, it's like a full tree branches. And when finally it touches the real targeted beneficiaries, maybe nothing reaches there. Or maybe it doesn't reach the way the state plans it. So once again, the intentions are not bad, but how you operationalize it, how you run the show could be having some problems. It can be intended, it can be unintended. In many countries, the states also spend money on the welfare, but then the nexus of bureaucracy and the politicians, they take all the money away and then nothing goes. On papers, it says so many people have been beneficiaries, but nothing goes. If you see, I don't want to name the countries, but I know if you start thinking, you will make a list of the countries or where the corruption, patronized, regulated by the states. So the corruption is basically encouraged by some elements of state, in nexus with the corporates, in nexus with bureaucracy and people as well. So the idea is that the claim about 1 trillion on welfare is more interesting and complicated. It shows up the recent report that the Cato Institute, which argued that the federal government spends $668 billion per year on 126 different welfare programs. So 126 means that health, about health. There is a health for the kids, for the elderly people, on education, primary education, secondary. So there are altogether 126 schemes. So there's a cash and cash light programs. As I said before, that you give the benefit in the form of direct cash or something similar to cash like vouchers. Healthcare, opportunity related program there where people are giving you some vocational studies so that you learn and you are able to work. Targeted and community programs. So you want to reach out some communities, some certain sections of society which are deprived, they have some troubled past, could be some drug affected people, some people who have been some criminal past. So you want to, target them. However, there is a confusion over the measurement of welfare. Driving on public road, going to the publicly funded hospital, national defense system, is it welfare? So the way, even the states, like the way we were discussing about the quantitative welfare and the qualitative welfare, states till date are confused that what should be the welfare. So in a country like America, they are still debating what is welfare. Should we even call it welfare? So these type of discussion, I want that you start thinking, you start bringing forth your thoughts, ideas, and share with me. Please do share it with me. I want to really, really, really hear from you what you think. Not now, if you don't have any point now, but please make sure that you use discussion forum, or when we have a next lecture, before I start the topic, you can stop me and say, Shab, can we continue what we discussed last week? I have some points. So always discuss. It's very important because you people try to understand. You may think out of the box. We academics, we have a very linear way of thinking. It took us a lot of efforts to go out of the box, but you people can be very innovative in terms of, so trust your intelligence and come forward with the points. But go through this article, please, whenever you get a chance. This BBC one and this Washington Post one. Welfare is dependent on both material goods and non-material goods. As I said, that the classical economist, first of all, they are only they're wealth oriented, but Alfred Marshall and his team, they are more about welfare oriented. But the problem with Marshall's definition was that he was only considering material welfare, like material wealth, material welfare. But in the modern definition of welfare, we include both tangible material and also non-material. Resource scarcity, unlimited ends, and the problem of choice is a reality. We have to deal with it. Remember the text I showed about this BBC, where the Chancellor of Exchequer in the UK is struggling. He wants to go for welfare, but there's not enough resources to, economics is a science of scarcity. We have to accept it, that in life, like in our personal relationships, like in our society, like in our, in every walk of life, we always struggle with the unlimited wishes and wants, but the way we can achieve it, the way we can achieve them, we have the limited sources. So like these examples, economics also have this problem of unlimited wants and the limited resources. But limited doesn't mean less. Even the richest country in the world, they have the limited resources. I remember once my teacher shared with me that he was visiting I think he was visiting Saudi Arabia. And that was a time when Saudi Arabia was getting very rich because the oil boom was taking place. And they were traveling in a car and they found that there is a junk yard sprawled over miles. And that junkyard is full of used cars. And there are cars, you can see, because it was so long that it took them time to cross that junkyard on both sides of the road. And this teacher of mine was thinking that, you know what, these cars are not totally abandoned. They're not just obsolete. Many of these cars, with a minor repair, maybe some battery, maybe some wire is broken, they can rerun on the roads. But because they were so rich, they don't mind throwing them away. And then my teacher said that, you know what, no matter how rich you are, he was talking to his Saudi host, no matter how rich you are, if you are wasting resources, you are shooting in your foot. This wastage now can hit you back in the coming times. Do you get my point? So this is very important, that this scarcity, we have to, no matter you live in the richest country in the world, don't forget the word scarcity. There is in our neighborhood in Sweden, this economist, Gunnar Myrdal, he gave a very pressing statement, which I never forget. And it always shows in he wrote a book called Asian Drama. And he wrote the book when this Asian economy were booming, Asian drama. And he wrote one sentence. He said that poverty anywhere is a threat to the prosperity everywhere. As long as there's one country poor in the world, as long as there's one region poor in the country, as long as there's one city in the region poor or as long as there's one person poor in the whole city, it will always pose a threat to the other rich countries, other rich regions, other rich companies, other rich people. So therefore, wastage anywhere could be a danger to the others. They could have simply sold those cars to them or gifted those cars to some other people. So there are many ways, or simply they could have reused them anyways. Alternative use and opportunity cost. We have the alternative uses because the means are limited and wants are unlimited. We have to bridge the gap. So we make sure that we prioritize. Okay, we have 24 hours and we have these are limited 24 hours. It can't be 24 hours a day, 24 hours. Limited means, wants could be unlimited. How to make a rational optimum use of those 24 hours. Your monthly salary is 2,000 euros, limited amount of money. You have the unlimited uses. You can go to, casino, wherever you want. How to prioritize your uses that you can get the maximum benefit or maximum satisfaction out of those spending. So, and then you choose, for example, the word I will discuss opportunity cost in the next lesson, the next part when we meet in a few minutes. And these opportunity cost and the production possibility curve, I keep it reserved for the next meeting, which happens in 15 minutes from now. All right. So you go enjoy your coffee, think about scarcity, don't get scared, only scarcity. And then we see each other in 15 minutes. Yep. All good. See you soon. And you guys also stay online. I'll come back and see you. We continue the lecture after 15 minutes, yeah? But for the time being, I take a short break. All right, so I welcome you again to our session. Before we went to the break, I, on purpose, didn't say much about the bottom last 2 points, which I will discuss with you now. You see this picture? This is this curve, this red curve, which is like, how to say, the concave looking. It's called production possibility curve. And for the sake of abbreviation, we call it PPC. This is the fundamental figurative expression of the welfare economists. those who decide, who shifted from welfare to growth orientation. The idea behind this picture is that how you can optimize the use of resources, but at the same time, you can't get rid of the problem of choice. If you pick one, you have to give up the other. You can't get with both hands everything. So so when you choose to come to the lecture in the morning, when you wake up 2 hours earlier than what you intend to get some knowledge from economics course, this is what you give, this is what you get. But what you give up could be 2 hours long extra sleep. That's your sacrifice, and that is called opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost of sleeping 2 hours extra is the economics lesson. You could be at work at that time, so it means you give up your job. It means if you could earn 30 euros during that time, so you had a choice to get 30 euros by working 2 hours extra or come to the lesson. When you pick up one, then it becomes the opportunity cost. So if you choose to come to the lesson, then your opportunity cost is the 30 euros which you missed. But if you prefer to work, then what is the opportunity cost of earning 30 euros is the economics lesson. But you can't do both, because as Robin said, we have limited means, but we have the unlimited uses. The uses are not only unlimited, but sometimes they can overlap. There can be conflict among users. Like the example which I gave you, that you have a choice to sleep 2 hours extra, or you could go to work and do some 2-hour job. You could even go for a walk and enjoy the nature. So your one welfare has gone down by not being in the middle of nature. But on the other hand, you have another welfare that maybe you get some knowledge by coming here, or maybe you even interact with your friends. So that is something you get. So you get, you lose. And the relationship between them is called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the next best alternative you can get. I can give you one more example before I go deep into this picture. I get my salary here. If I get a job offer from somewhere, and the salary from an alternative job is less than what I get here, should I join the new job? Yes or no? Yeah. Other things being equal. So just imagine that I get 4,000 euros in job X, and I get an offer from job Y, which is 3,500. Then what keeps me in this job is the extra 500 which I get from the current job. You with me? It means that out of my salary, if I split my salary 4,000, then out of 4,000 is 3,500 which I could get from a comparable job. This extra 500 which I get is called my opportunity cost, which I would have to give up if I change my job. So when you study the opportunity cost, you always keep in mind the concept of next best alternative, next choice. You have a choice to sleep extra in the morning, but you opted for something else to gain something, but this gain was not costless. The cost was the 2-hour sleep you sacrificed. This is very important. At the macro level, at the country level, imagine that in a country, there are only two resources, labor and capital. Labor means the workforce, yeah, And the capital means all the machinery, equipment, infrastructure, even those screws, tools, screwdrivers, hammer, sickle, all those things we use in the factory or in the farms. That is called capital. So we have the labor, we have the capital. And imagine when we combine the labor and capital, we can only produce two things in the whole country. Just a simplistic example. You can either produce the food, which is on the vertical axis. If you put all labor and capital and only produce food, the maximum you can produce is this much. You can see that this tipping point, this red point here, this is the maximum food you can produce by combining. So if you put all the resources towards food, then this is the maximum production you can have. And if you divert all the labor and capital towards clothing, then the maximum clothing you can get is 7 million meters or whatever. So this is the maximum clothing you can produce by. So, but the problem is that if you use all the resources to produce clothing, then no food is produced in the country. But if you produce only food in the country, then there's no clothing. There are two extremes. When you combine these 2 points, we get a curve. I'll let you know why it's a curve, why not a straight line. This straight line, this curve is called production possibility curve. It shows various combinations which you can produce in an economy. So for instance, if you choose to produce this much food and this much clothing, right? So you are at point, let me see, this whatever, X, yeah? Now what you do, you want to produce 1 extra unit of clothing. But when you are moving, when you are producing 1 extra unit of clothing, you have to give up some food. Remember, you come down, if you move from X to Y, can you see this movement? When you move from X to Y, you produce 1 extra unit of clothing, but you give up 1 extra unit of food as well. Do you? So it's not that the food remains same and clothing increases, no. But look here, when you produce even 1 more extra unit of clothing, how many units of food you have to give up? 2. This is very important. Why? Because you can't just take away the resources from one work and put them to other without losing the efficiency. If I'm a teacher here, if I get an same example, I get an alternative job offer, but that is, I have to work as an administrator. Would I be equally efficient straight away? If you have a piece of land where you can produce potatoes in Finland, but if you suddenly start thinking of producing something else in the same ground, in the same farm, would the land be so fertile, so flexible that it would produce I mean, some of the crops, it will not even accept the seed. It will say, no, this is not fit for this type of crop. You have to condition the land so many years to make it compatible to certain type of crops. You can't just take away one crop and replace with the other. Are you getting my point? You all are working, you may be working in the future, all of you, I'm sure. Suddenly, if you have to leave your job and do something else, some other job, it takes some time. This is called friction. This is called labor friction. So it's not, the transition is not frictionless, let alone changing job. If you move somewhere, if you travel somewhere and you have to sleep one night somewhere, maybe in the hotel or at your friend's place, you would not even feeling like, you won't even get a proper sleep because you don't feel comfortable. You with me? Even the sleep is not fully replaceable. If all the factors are fully efficient, fully movable, transferable, without losing the efficiency, then you know what? Then your production possibility curve would have been then your production possibility curve would have been like a straight line. That you get something and your sacrifice is constant. So if you get something, let's say if you get more clothing, sorry how I write it. And here is food. And if you move more clothing, even more clothing, even more clothing, the amount of food you sacrifice is this much, amount of food you sacrifice this much, then this number, this amount, and this amount would be constant. But the factor is that the factors are not so perfectly mobile. I want to give you one more example of immobility or friction. You're working here in Uvascula. Let's say you are getting 2,000 euros a month. And then you get a job, and here, now, you have your friends here, you have your family here, the family is living in one apartment, and now you are getting a job offer for, let's say, 2,700 in Helsinki. Is 2,700 more than 2,000? Definitely more. Would you go straight away? Just go. What stops you?
Because, for example, maybe someone just wants to be here, his or her family,
yeah,
and he or she may need.
Your monetary gain, your potential monetary gain is 700 euros, right? Your loss can be both monetary and non-monetary. The non-monetary loss is that you'll be missing your family, friends. You have to start all over again. You even have to learn how to use the public transport, because they have trams and those bus passes and those cards. It may be complex. It can be more traffic there. It could be that you here in Uvascula, your workplace is very close to your house, but in Helsinki you might have to shift two metros and one tram and like that. So you have to go through some non-monetary sacrifices, but even there can be some monetary sacrifice as well. You have to rent a new apartment. Your family is not going with you, so you're paying rent here, and then you are paying rent in Helsinki as well. So when you combine, then what happened? Your sacrifice, the transfer cost is increasing. Exactly this what happens. If people have no emotions, if people have no such non-monetary measures of welfare, it could be possible that the production possibility curve would be straight, like a straight line, but it doesn't happen like this. So very realistic picture is that you are getting this type of shape. So more you are moving resources from food to clothing, the lesser, more and more sacrifice. Of course, when you want to have more clothing, you have to give up some food. The question is how much food you give up. At each step, you have to give up more and more and more food. The sacrifice will increase. The same thing, the same argument would apply if you want to move away from clothing towards food. If you look at this shape, if I just change the axis, you will find out that if we want to produce more and more food, then the number of units of clothing that you have to sacrifice, give up, would be increasing at every step. So this makes the production possibility curve not a straight line, because when I have this point and I have this point, I could have simply joined them straight away. It would have looked like a straight line. When you have 2 points, you can make a straight line. But I chose to make a concave shape. The idea is that realistically, the resources are not perfectly substitutable. They're not perfectly replaceable. I use a piece of land to make a university. If suddenly we, from tomorrow onwards, we declare that, no, this is no longer a university, this is now a corporate office, then this building will not, because this building is designed from the point of view of a university, it can't be fully functional for a corporate office straight away. You get my point? So even the So the resources are not fully substitutable. They can be close substitutes. It's better to have a corporate office inside the building. There are rooms, we can make some partition, there is a restaurant. It's better than outside, but it's not perfectly substitute. It's not a perfect substitute. You get the point? So because the resources are not perfectly substitute the land capital, which hitherto you are using more in food, you can't simply move it to clothing straight away. And these frictions, these additional sacrifices, that what we go through is called, this makes the production possibility curve, what shape I call it? Concave to the origin. Concave. You know, we have the convex lens and the concave lens. So this is concavity, is it adding to the, it makes the line concave to the origin. I hope you understand this. Yeah. But remember one thing, this is a very static situation. Why it's called static? Because this is given resources, given amount of resources, given amount of labor, giving amount of capital, right? But who says that the labor and capital amount always remain constant? They can increase. Increasing population, increasing universities, better education, better training, labor qualitatively and quantitatively can increase, more capital, more better designs. Remember the clothing, it was handloom, then it became mechanical, and now we have the electric system, yeah? And now we have designing, computerized everything. So even the capital's quality and the labor's quality can be enhanced in the future. And this could make, maybe before technological development, this blue production possibility curve was what you could get. But with the technological advancements, the production possibility curve itself increases. You know? Do you get my point? So this red line, this red curve shows that the quality and the quantity of resources have increased. Make sense? It could also be possible that within the time frame, not in case of all the productions, the quality of labor and capital increases. Let me give you this hypothetical example. I didn't have in the slide, but I can do it right now. If I can quickly show you, not this one. Imagine this is food and this is clothing. This is the original production possibility curve. But what happened? During the time, our agricultural sector is stagnant. No development has taken place in agriculture. No technological, no better seeds, no better forms of irrigation. There is technological stagnation in the food sector, but textile sector, clothing sector has really grown up. So it could be possible that your new production possibility curve is like this. The food doesn't increase, but the clothing increase. Or it could be possible the food in fact decrease and the clothing increase. So all types of shapes are possible. But what doesn't change is the concavity of the production possibility curve. Does it make sense? Yeah. Look at this one. In a given time frame, this red curve is highlighting the production possibility curve. So can I ask you one thing? X and Y. Between X and Y, what is more optimum point? Or is there any optimum point between X and Y? X and Y. Which one is better? Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to say it, but if they are not equally losing, for example, if we take the first picture, so we have a little more food, yeah, and less clothing, so I believe so we lose less if we reduce food amount, so I believe food is better.
Okay, but why we move is also depending upon demand. It could be possible that over time the demand for food is not increasing, but for the clothing, the demand is increasing. So then we have no choice but to move from one point to another. My point of view is that every point on this red curve is the optimum point. Why so? Because every point on this red curve shows it could be very extreme that you only produce food, no clothing, or only clothing, no food, or more food, less clothing, or more clothing, less food. That's a different thing. But one common good thing about this curve is that you have put all the resources employed. You are utilizing all the resources. No resource is wasted in the process. Is it a good thing or bad thing? Are you wasting your resources? Do you remember the example I gave you about the Saudi junkyard, like a graveyard of expensive cars? Here, the one good thing is that the resources are fully employed. Look at this point V. This is called suboptimal point, suboptimal, or it's less than optimal point. Why so? Because at V point, we are not using the resources fully. Why? Because we could produce more clothing for the same food. Can you see that? So from V, we could have, if food is this much, then we could have added this much of additional clothing. Or for the same clothing, we could have added more food, or in between some combinations of more food and more clothing. You with me? So if a country's resources utilization is below the production possibility curve, it means that we are not optimally utilizing our resources. Resources unused are equal to resources wasted. And one economic sin or a crime which a country can commit is by letting its resources wasted. So V is the most obnoxious point, is a bad point. However, all the points on this curve are optimal point. We can debate more food, more clothing, but at least one common denominator is that every point on the red line shows that the resources are fully utilized. But this, if there's a fictitious point here, it's a far cry. You can't reach here. Why? Because in the given time frame, your resources do not permit you to go there. In the future you can. Why not? And I can show you, for example, this curve. Look, this curve. Maybe in 2020, this blue curve was the PPC. Then any point, please see the, can you see the cursor? Here, this point was beyond your reach. But in 2 years' time, whatever time frame, you are able to push your production possibility curve here. And now that point is achievable. So it means that every shift in the production possibility curve shows the economic growth. We are growing economically. Our resources, which are at our disposal, they are increasing quantitatively and also qualitatively. Maybe we have the same amount of workers, but the efficiency, the productivity of workers have gone up. If you see over the countries, the number of people in the agricultural sector have constantly fallen. But if you see the productivity of agricultural sector, it's increasing. In the developed countries, less than 2% of the population on an average is in the agricultural sector. But look at the productivity. It's massive, huge. So over the time, for example, in the food production, I'm talking about the crops, not the packed food, not the factory food, but the food that you grow in the crops, in the form of crops. There is a significant decline in the population directly engaged into agricultural activities across the world. In fact, that is a sign, that's also a sign of, as an indicator of progress. If you look at the developing countries or the underdeveloped countries, you will find that a very big percentage of population is directly engaged into cropping, agriculture. But then in those countries, the productivity is low. But over the time, but in the developed countries, it's opposite. Productivity is very high, but the percentage of population is significantly low. But that is the point, that here, now it can be a dream, but in the 5 years' time, it's a reality. And that's called economic growth. I want to ask you one question. What is the difference between economic growth and economic development? What do you think? Are they synonyms? Are they interchangeable? You can use growth word in one sentence, and next sentence it could be development. Or are they different?
Maybe the difference is just related to point of view and the curve. Because undeveloped country actually has lots of sources for investing. So they actually want to use their sources fully, so they try to achieve the curve. But economic growth means something like in the next 5 years, for example, we can develop our knowledge, our technology, so we can, with the same soul, we can achieve more. So maybe this kind of difference.
Okay, interesting. Yes, the lady over.
Economic growth is more like increase in the national income or in the output of the country, and then economic development is more of an increase in the quality of life.
Fantastic.
Life expectancy.
Yes.
Reading levels.
Very true. Very true. Economic growth is a part of economic development. But economic development includes growth, which is, as you said, and the lady said, there's a quantitative increase. There's more food, more clothing. But when it comes to the institutional changes, now in the past, the companies were some small scale, local family based. Now they become multinational. It's a very big institutional development, organizational development. The infrastructure has improved, organizational development. So when all these qualitative, so not only the economic growth, not only the figures of the output has increased, but all those determinants which can help the economic growth to rise, those variables have also increased. Tax system has become more transparent. Corruption has gone down. If you want to take a license to start a new job, you don't have to wait for years. It's everything goes instantly. If you want to start a new company, it's so easy. Your shares are trading in Helsinki Stock Exchange. Nobody's cheating. It's so transparent. You have several investment opportunities. If you want to have a startup, there is a state, there is a local city council, which has a wing which will help you. So when all these support system, which the lady very nicely said, that it's more like qualitative thing. It's like facilitators. So not just there is a number increasing, but an ecosystem of facilities is also developing. Then when we put together them, that is called economic development. It's very important for the countries to focus on economic growth, but it's also, or rather even more important, to go for the economic development. Economic development is more about the institutional and technological growth, basically. You get my point? I'm teaching, I could have taught you in some lesser infrastructured facility, but now this shows the development side, that we have people all over the world right now listening to this lecture, and then you are here, and all this thing has been brought about by the organizational changes and the institutional changes and the technological changes. So this is not just the same lecture which I was delivering you 5 years ago to some other students, but the whole ecosystem of this delivery, the quality has also enhanced. So this is called development. So economic development is both quantitative and qualitative. Do we finish at 1/4 or already at noon? Huh? Good. So if we have some slides. I want to give you some homework. Next time when we meet, please note down slide 10, 11, 12, because I discussed it already. Opportunity cost, we discussed. And I don't see it's undoable. We need to come up to slide 16, yeah? So slide 10 to slide 16. Please do it by yourself, okay? When I come back, when we meet next week, in the beginning, we'll have some discussion, briefly about this, and I will ask you if you've done it or not. If I remember, well, I'll try to remember. But then the lesson would start from slide 17. And then in the second part of the lesson, we would watch a video together. And then that's like as I said before, that it's not just something you learn more contents, but it will be also somewhat a practice. Because I would show you the video in parts and then discussion in between, and this will help you to make your assignment also, finalize it. Very quickly, I can discuss with you, because this I want that from 10 to 16 you do by yourself. Very quickly, I want to, for the rest of the time, I want to discuss with you that we also use 2 more phrases called positive and normative economics. Positive economics is, it is what it is. And normative economics is what should be then. So when we have this expression, what is ideal form, what should be, what ought to be, then we are essentially talking about the normative economics. Look at the word norm, normative, ethical, something, best practices. And positive is the reality. So what is real is real. We can't change it. At the end of June 2014, public sector net debt was so many billions.
Keep it outside.
Petra, could you mute yourself, or is it, oh, sorry, maybe somebody else. I just named Petra. So if you can, please mute yourself. Yeah, so look at this. The public sector debt was some $1 billion pounds. It was 77.3% of the gross domestic product of the UK. During the previous year, this term stood at 74%. So the idea of the first sentence, try to understand, is that this year, well, the current year, 2014, the country's debt is 77.3%. Last year, it was 74%. Is it normative statement or a positive statement? Positive is, it is what it is. It's a reality. It just indicates the reality, a fact. The normative is when you become more like persuasive, you want to give some advice, you want to give some suggestion, you want to give some inputs. Hey guys, don't do this way, do it this way. Maybe things get better. So when you read the first sentence, which category of economics it fits into? Positive or normative? Huh? Positive. It just shows the data. It just shows that, you know, last year the debt was low, this year debt is more. It doesn't say debt is good, debt is bad. Now, if you give a statement that based on this fact, you are making an interpretation that this is a serious thing, in 1 year's time, the country's GDP, the debt has increased by 3% point, it can pose danger to the British economy. So what we should do? We must do something. We must cut our expenses. We must borrow less. We must increase our production capacity. We must minimize, we should minimize our wastage. Look, am I sounding suggestive now? Am I giving some suggestions? So when you see some fact, then you reflect, and your reflection could be normative. So technically, if you don't bother too much about how we do it, because it's easier said than done, you are giving a suggestion to the British government that they should do something, not to let 3% increase every year in the debt. It can push the economy into real bad shape. And in fact, you're also suggesting that they should, because this 3% debt increase is really big, then they should do something to repay, to bring this debt down. Not only to let it go further, but also bring it down back to the original figure. So all those suggestions which you are giving, advices, whenever you suggest something, whenever you advise something, you often, without being conscious, happen to focus on should be or should not be, yeah? Then it becomes normative. So whenever you see the data, it's you just say the data loud, it's positive. But when you draw some conclusions, when you make some inferences, when you draw some interpretations, when you are reflecting, then it becomes, or it may become, normative. The Bank of England should take strict austerity measures in order to check rising public debt. Otherwise, the UK economy will be susceptible to inflationary pressure. What it is? What is? Say it loud. Normative or positive? Number 2 sentence, is it positive or normative? It took so much time. Sorry? It's normative. You are suggesting. Yeah. So whenever should be is either clearly visible, or you can see the tone and the tenor of the text is that it's like they're giving some suggestion, do this, don't do this thing. Yeah, they're taking some positions. Then this idea become normative. And here the word should be so obvious. Based on the first sentence, the second sentence is saying that the Bank of England should take some strict austerity. Have you heard this word austerity, by the way? I on purpose pick it up, austerity, because this is very widely used word. Austerity. Austerity is in whenever there is a economic crisis, then there is always a demand by some section of the economy and the society is that the public expenditure should be cut, freeze the salaries, don't employ new public servants. If you are spending money on taking care of museums or libraries, don't just save some money. We are in the crisis, save the money. Spend even more carefully. I mean, every euro you spend, be super careful what you spend. and try. This is called austerity. And in many countries, the pro-left labor unions are anti this word austerity, because austerity means don't increase the wages, save money, because more increase in the wages can push your cost up. Don't generate too many employment opportunities, and wherever possible, you can, if you can actually let people, if you can even sack people, because then this pro-right people start thinking that, you know what, this job is not even required. Let's save the money. Let's do the austerity. Now you get my point? So austerity measures mean some severe money saving activities. This is called austerity. So it means that you are giving, because why the debt is increasing, because somebody's thinking in Bank of England that maybe the government's debt is increasing because it's spending too much, the revenue is less, and because revenue is less and the expenses are more, so the country has to borrow to fill the gap, to fill the deficit. But okay, you can't do it every year. You can't. You have to take some tough measures of money saving. That is austerity. Yeah, the Gulf, again, maybe very quickly, Gulf countries have huge oil reserves. Positive, normative. Positive. The government should spend more on education. Poor people are suffering due to price rise of essential commodities. Positive. Bank has increased its interest rates. People should be encouraged to save in post offices and commercial banks. Normative. So it's so simple. But here I wrote should be very explicitly, but in the exam, the word should be can also be implicit. So I may not clearly write should be. Should be is not the only parameter of making distinction, but the tone sounds more, may sound, I might use some different expression, but okay. That's everything for today. Remember slide 10 to 16, you do by yourself. If you have a question, problem, because I have a feeling that I have discussed them before, so I don't want to be repetitive. So, but just in case you come across any question, you ask me. Otherwise, we'll continue further. All right, thank you very much, and see you next week.